Well, it's 2023, it's wintertime, it's cold. Nobody's planning on buying animals right now. However, if you're looking at buying livestock come springtime, there are definitely some things you need to consider having in place before you bring those animals home. And that's what we're going to talk about on this video. And let me allow you to learn from my mistakes, because I went and looked at pigs before I was ready to purchase pigs and made a purchase anyway. So I didn't have farmland yet. I was still living inside of a residential neighborhood where the rules and regulations clearly stated, no horses, no cattle, no swine. I bought pigs, brought them home to my residential neighborhood because I didn't have any place else to keep them, and put them in my backyard and just hoped that nobody would say anything. Now, immediately we got to looking for farmland, ended up finding some, made a purchase. It was raw land. Now, there was a machine shed, an old barn on that property, and we managed to get the pigs housed in that. However, there was no electricity on this property. There was no water on this property. There was no water source on this property. So it was probably 6 or 8 miles from where I was living at that time. So a couple times a day I had to truck water to that property to make sure the pigs were taken care of. There was no infrastructure in place, so I had to put fencing in to allow the pigs to get out of the barn and do what pigs do. I just made, I'm gonna say I made poor choices, but they weren't the most well-educated choices. Some things you need to consider before you bring animals home. There's 5 things, and we're going to go through those right now. All right, so the first thing that you want to consider when bringing small livestock onto your farm or your homestead is how you're going to house those animals. Now, I've settled on this type of shelter over the years, but I've built many kinds. The key thing to consider is how big your animal's going to get, and whether or not you're going to have to get in and out of that shelter. Any shelter is the ability to keep the elements off of your animals and keep them out of the wind. So you're at least going to need 3 sides, and then understand your property and where the wind comes from, and make sure that the animals have the opportunity to get around and get out of that wind. You want your animals to be able to get into the sun. Obviously when it's cold, it warms them up, the whole 9 yards, but also think about your shelter and where you position it. In the summertime, I like to find some shade to put my shelters in. In the wintertime, more of the get them out to where the sun can hit them and warm up the insides of those. Now, they don't have to be airtight. They don't have to be insulated. They don't have to be air conditioning. You do not have to build your animal the Taj Mahal. The second is fencing. You have to be able to keep your animals where you want your animals. And I'll tell you, residential neighborhood, I went out and bought a Boerling. He was probably right about 8 weeks when I brought him home. I put him in my garden because my garden was fenced. Well, this little stinker found a way to get out of the garden. And when I found out that he was missing, we put a post out on Facebook, said, hey, we got a pig that was missing. We immediately got messages back. And that pig, I think I picked him up about 10 miles away, 2 towns over. And this is all within a span of a couple hours. Now, that pig didn't run himself 2 towns over, but an individual picked him up in a parking lot and was like, I can't just leave this pig here, and loaded him up and took him home. And, luckily I got the pig back, put him right back into that spot. And I went and sat down and I watched this little stinker, and he managed to hop up on some bags of mulch I had stacked by a raised bed, and the raised bed was probably 2.5 feet high. No way he could jump in there on his own. But I had these things set at just the right spots where he could jump up on the mulch, jump into that raised bed, walk across it, jump out of it, and he was out in the wide open world. Make sure the fence you put in place can contain the animal that you're bringing home. Now, I have this solar charger, and I've trained my pigs to 2 strands of hot wire. And that's pretty much how I keep them confined. Outside of my farrowing pens and my weaning pen, I keep those behind a hog panel. Shelter and fence, absolutely critical. All right, the next thing you absolutely have to consider is water and a water supply for your animals. Now, this is going to depend on the type of animal you're bringing in, how many you're bringing, and then where you're going to put them on your property. So like I said, we put pigs at various places here. We do not have water. We got one outside spigot on this farm, and it's off the side of the farmhouse. So we have to run hose. Now, when I put the pigs way out in the pasture, I had a 275-gallon tote that I would fill with water, only about halfway because my tractor couldn't carry it otherwise. And we would run that back and forth. So look at how much water you're going to have to move, how you're going to get that water to your animals, and then, you know, it's going to vary times of year. So I tend to use these rubber watering buckets. They're about 13 gallons. I like them because in the wintertime, they're easy to bust the ice out of. They're easy to keep clean. It allows the pigs to get up in there and drink how they do. And they're tall enough that it kind of keeps them from laying in it, but when it's hot, they're gonna, if they can get up in it and lay in it, they're going to. And then the last thing is a good quality feed. You know, start at your box store. If you don't know, go to your box store, see what they have available for the type of animal that you're bringing home, and make sure you have some of that feed on hand. You know, if you're bringing pigs, if they're smaller pigs, 18% protein feed is going to be fine. 16% just as good. I wouldn't go any lower than that. But make sure you have feed. You have enough feed on hand, you know, to keep your animals fed, and you understand how much feed you need to give them per day. Anyway, think about how many animals you have, how much feed you're going to have to get, how you're going to store that feed. Rodents will be a problem, especially if you're storing it with something they can chew through. Or if you leave bags stacked on a pallet or something like that, the mice and rats are going to get into it. You know, think about how you're going to store your feed. And once again, if they can chew through it, they're going to chew through it and they're going to get into that feed. So plastic trash cans and stuff like that, while that is a good solution, they'll eventually get in there if they know that feed is there. I tend to use the galvanized trash cans, like the 30-gallon or whatever they are. Each of those holds 150 pounds of feed. And so far, we haven't had any problems with rodents getting into them. Now, if you have a co-op or something close by where you live, if you're out in farm country, go talk to those folks. You may be able to get a feed that's milled locally, that's of good quality and considerably cheaper than what you'll get at the box stores. Thing to consider, and it's very important, is the health and welfare of your animals and the ability for you to get that animal to a veterinarian or to get a veterinarian to your animal. So initially, you may not be comfortable vaccinating your animals. You may not be comfortable diagnosing your animals if they have a problem. So that's part of the animal husbandry pieces you'll pick up as you go along. Make sure the vet sees the type of animal that you're bringing home. Now, these are animals. They're hardy. The biggest issue that we have are internal and external parasites, worms and mites. There's ways that you can vaccinate the animals to get rid of those things. If you're not comfortable doing it, it depends on how many animals you have as to what it's going to cost if the vet has to come out and do it. But most of those medications you can buy without a prescription, and you can administer them yourself. You know, they have the dosage recommendation and all of that on the packaging. Easy enough to follow. And if you are going to have to take animals to a vet, ensure that you have the means to do so. Hauling a 20-pound pig to the vet, not a big deal. Hauling a 250-pound pig to the vet, it's absolutely an evolution. So there you go. That's 5 tips. If you're going to bring home livestock this spring, start doing your homework now. Start putting the pieces and parts in place now before you go out and look at animals and make a purchase and bring it home. Get out there and get educated and have some fun and, live your best life. And hey, until next time, y'all be good.